Hi, I'm Dr. Margot Jacques, owner and director of the Juniper Center. So we are probably about halfway through our 10th week of the stay-at-home order here in the state of Illinois and living to tell. And boy, I'll tell you, we have sure seen a variety of responses from people, from anxiety to panic to boredom to depression. And as this continues to go on, those responses are very understandable. So today, I wanted to follow up. I've been talking about the fight response in one video, the flight response in another video, and this one today will be about the freeze response. And we'll talk about a couple of things that you can do if you find yourself coming into this response. So this is a response like all of the other fight, flight, or freeze. All of these responses really are survival states, survival responses, which they're wonderful. Thank goodness we have them. And our brain really likes them. Meaning once we have them, our brain is more likely to take us to that place again, because anything that our brain interprets as a survival strategy, it's going to sit up and take notice for. So perhaps the freeze response, and I'll describe that a little bit more in a moment, is very familiar to you, and you know exactly what that is. You've had it throughout your life in various situations, or maybe it feels kind of new to you. You're not used to being in a state of freeze. And I would sort of describe the freeze state, not like freeze tag, that we played as kids. I'm dating myself. I don't know that my children who are teenagers have ever played freeze tag, but their loss. However, what we're describing really is a state of collapse. It can be a state of collapse or a state of just disconnect from your emotions, disconnect from your body. So you may feel like a talking head. Your head is kind of on a shelf. Nothing that you really are aware of from the neck down or the chin down or, sometimes the eyeballs down, just not really aware. Or emotionally, you can be talking about something that's really, for somebody else might be really difficult, but for you, you're just kind of disconnected. It's like you're talking about the weather. Yeah, the sun is out right now, the leaves are budding. It sort of has that tone and tenor, not really sort of including the gravity of what's happening. Or it can look like a state of collapse, just sort of, you just feel sort of sunk, not much energy, not much drive, don't really care much, and that's not necessarily your typical state, let's say. So that is what a freeze state can feel like, can look like to other people. It can be really tough to miss. Sometimes people will feel like you're just emotionally not really there, or you're not dialed in. For you, you may experience it as I was describing, as that collapse, or just you're not aware of much of anything. So what is the purpose of this response? We talked about the fight response and the flight response as being ways to try to fight off a predator, right? So if a predator is coming your way and your initial instinct is to turn and run, right? You're going to get yourself out of the way of danger. That's great. That's a wonderful survival strategy. In the olden days, got back to the cave. You were okay at that point. Or if you couldn't flee, the next response might be to fight. And so you might turn and do what you could to try to defend yourself with whatever was at your disposal to try to protect yourself from whatever the threat was in front of you. And then this third response, actually, Dr. Stephen Porges, as people had been discussing this fight or flight response for many, many, many years, he started observing that actually there seems to be a third response, which is this freeze response. And he was describing how in nature, this is a really natural response for animals to have, or organisms to have. So if you think about it, let's think of a bunny, for instance. It's that time of year. Bunnies are all over the place. It's springtime here in Chicago. So I don't know if you've ever passed by a bunny, but usually I go for a walk with my dog in the evening and she'll spot them long before I do. And then all of a sudden in the distance, I'll see something that's just sort of, kind of frozen in this position. just completely frozen, not budging a muscle. Nothing's moving. They don't look like they're breathing, right? This is an absolute defensive physiological response that is designed to help a predator who's not really very observant just keep on moving, right? They're not going to notice you if you're just completely solid and frozen and in place. So that was one way that this response is thought to help now humans, but certainly many species manage as a way of defending themselves, because quite frankly, bunnies, they can run, but the coyotes in the neighborhood are usually faster. Nothing to fight with, can't box, those little cottontails, not much. So they really have to rely on either fleeing or freezing. That's what's at their disposal. And it's an automatic response. They don't stop and think, here comes Margot with her dog. No, it's just boom, it's that quick. So the other way that this response might show up, this freeze response, is if, let's say, you're an elk or a gazelle on the savannah. Nobody gets injured in my stories, by the way, but you're a gazelle on the savannah, and all of a sudden you see the herd start to run. So you start to run. The first instinct is flee, because again, I don't think gazelles are great boxers, or, what are they with the hoofs? Anyway, so they need to take off and run. So they're running and the predator is running behind them. And let's say the predator actually catches up to, again, nobody's going to get hurt here, but let's say the predator is going to catch up to that, it's a lion, is going to catch up to that gazelle. And once the gazelle feels the contact or senses that they really can't get away from the predator, their system will go into a state of shutdown, into a freeze state. And what happens in this freeze state is that their system, their nervous system, is helping them not fully experience what's happening to them. As you can see, there could be some real benefit to that. So everything begins to slow down. The experience, the awareness slows down. Everything starts to shut down a bit to try to prepare them for what might come next. So it could look like, they are dead, they're just lying there. And of course, that's another way to help dissuade a predator. So they both don't look like they're alive anymore, but also it helps protect them from feeling what might be coming their way. So in my story, the lioness sees another lioness coming along and she takes off to go challenge that one. And the gazelle is lying there, and all of a sudden there'll be some trembling in the system, which is their nervous system starting to come back online out of this freeze state to prepare them to run again. And all of a sudden, up and choom, off they'll go, and they're back into another nervous system state. So this state is really useful. We can see it in humans in a lot of different ways, but for our purposes right now with this virus, with the world that we're facing right now, with what can feel a bit insurmountable, when people are feeling kind of trapped, they're feeling uncertain about what's going to happen next. Some people are reporting that they're getting into this freeze state. They just feel like lumps on the couch, hard to get out of bed, don't really have any drive, don't really have any motivation. They feel kind of stuck, or they're not getting much done in the day. They're, kind of wandering aimlessly, or they're stuck watching TV and that's all they can do. So in a freeze state, what you want to do for your system is, since this reaction in freeze is everything sort of shuts down, slows down, you want to give your nervous system the opposite of that. So it might mean that you don't have to get up and get out of your chair and go running, but you might, if you're sitting on your couch or you're sitting in a chair or you're lying in bed, you might try to introduce what are called micro movements. And micro movements are just what they sound like. It's the smallest of flexing of a muscle. So right now I'm doing slightly exaggerated micro movements in my shoulders, where I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this. It's just very small movements. The language of the nervous system is subtle. So it's just doing little bits of movement throughout your body and seeing what happens. You're doing this with intention, with observation. What happens when I do this? Does anything change? Do I start to notice a shift? Do I start feeling tingling anywhere? Do I start feeling, not to be gross, but like maybe I'm producing a little more saliva, maybe my guts start to churn? All of those sorts of sensations will start to tell you that you're moving out of that frozen state, out of an emergency response state, back down into some social engagement, which is really where you want to be. It's a much calmer state in your nervous system. So just doing little micro movements, starting at your head, moving all the way down slowly to your toes, noticing what happens, taking some deep breaths in that place. The other thing is, again, you want to give some movement. So something like going up to a wall and just pushing yourself off of the wall, for example, is another way to introduce what's called proprioception, proprioceptive material for your brain through your shoulders. Just push, like doing push-ups against the wall, just slowly, nothing big, but noticing the sensation in your shoulders. Maybe you're up on your toes and you're noticing that sensation, those sensations in your toes. Maybe go up on your toes and back down again as you're pushing. Again, it's just slow little movements, nothing grand, just to get some input into your system. Another way to do this would be lying in bed and maybe doing some yoga twists. Again, this is just kind of lying in bed. You have your arms out to the sides. You've got your legs turned one way, and then your head is turned the opposite way. And just doing a bit of a twist through the spine, and maybe just doing some subtle movements. Again, you're trying to get that sense of movement in your system, because if we think of freeze as being a bit of collapse, a bit of holding, this is a way to start introducing subtle movement and letting your system start to come back online. So those are 3 ways you might introduce some movement into a freeze response. I hope that's helpful to you. We're hoping all of you get through this. We're all doing fine. Please let me know if you have any questions. Again, this is Dr. Margot Jacot, owner and director of the Juniper Center. Please call us if there's any way we can be of help. Or you can email us at info@thejunipercenter.com. Thanks so much, everyone, and be well.